IVM. We would like to thank HDFC Life Insurance for supporting this show. HDFC Life Insurance has created an online video series called Behind the Journey with some of the most interesting people from the creative and entertainment industry. It explores the stories that are behind the glitz and glamour of the spotlight and screaming fans. Let's listen in now to a snippet from the episode featuring Olympic medalist Sakshi Malik.
सेविंग्स और इन्वेस्टमेंट में भी डिसिप्लिन चाहिए होता है. जैसे रेसलिंग में है कि वो तुरंत रिजल्ट नहीं मिलता है, सालों साल लगते हैं जो भी हमने ड्रीम सोचा, जो हमें गोल अचीव करना है उसको पूरा करने के लिए.
As Sakshi said, investment and savings require as much discipline as athletics. You can watch all the episodes of Behind the Journey on HDFC Life Insurance's YouTube channel, youtube.com/HDFC Life. Take control of your personal goals with HDFC Life Insurance's financial solutions. Plan now with HDFC Life Insurance.
Terms and conditions apply. HDFC Life Insurance Company Limited, IRDAI registration number 101.
You've tuned into a show called Mr. and Mrs Binge-Watch and you were expecting a spoiler-free episode. So there are many spoilers on this episode. Kripya dhyan dijiye. Hello. It's Oscar week and Aniruddha and I have just finished watching the Oscars yesterday. You've tuned into a brand new episode of Mr. and Mrs Binge-Watch. I'm, of course, Janice and in front of me is my husband, Aniruddha Guha. What did you think, Guha? We woke up at 6 in the morning. I mean, we do it every year, to be honest. We wake up at 6:30. I've even woken up. I remember when I was a journalist, I've even woken up at, I think, 5:36 to watch the damn red carpet. Because, you have to go into office and create all these packages about who wore what and why and all that rubbish.
Sure.
But this year, I woke up like 10 minutes later than you. What do you think overall? Worth waking up? Like, was it worth our time?
So here's the thing, right? I've been waking up for the Oscars for the last 2 decades now almost. Easy.
Really?
Yeah. At least, I mean, since I've been in college easily. And definitely since I started working 15 years ago. So I have been waking up in the mornings to watch the Oscars for as long as I can remember. Definitely the last 12, 13 years. And
there was 1 year in between though where we decided ki raat ko
No, never with the Oscars. We did it with the Golden Globes.
Maybe.
So you see, no, we did it with the Emmys.
Emmys, correct.
So you and I wake up twice a year early in the morning to watch something live. One is the Emmys and one is the Oscars. Of course, the Oscars I have never not seen live for as long as I can remember.
Fine. I just thought maybe ek saal ho gaya.
But I remember thinking about it this year really strongly. Because I didn't feel as crazily excited about any of the movies this year the way I did, say, 3 years ago, where there was a La La Land and there was a Moonlight and there was a Manchester by the Sea the same year. It just felt like a year where you were really keen to wake up in the morning and see what's going to happen. Also, in terms of a lot of the winners this year, they were pretty much a lock. So whether it was Joaquin Phoenix, whether it was Renée Zellweger, whether it was Brad Pitt, whether it was Laura Dern, in fact, in every category, including the writing, editing, and so on and so forth, all the, guys who were expected to win won.
Yeah.
The only real interest was whether Parasite did become the first foreign language film to ever win the Oscar. Again, even though a lot of people might think of it as at a macro level as it being this big upset, where a foreign language film sort of comes in and, pulls the carpet from under 1917's feet, which was like the most likely American film to win the Oscar.
Yeah.
While that might seem like an upset, the buzz for Parasite has been so strong, or the fact that people have been talking about how it might become the first ever foreign language film to win the Best Picture, even before it did, shows that somewhere it's not really an upset.
Yeah, I also want to throw in this element into the conversation because, like every year, the Oscars had a fair share of controversies this year as well, right? One was the fact that there were no female directors included in the Best Directors list.
Right.
Despite the fact that, filmmakers like Greta Gerwig gave like great films for all of us this year, right? Then, of course, the other fact that in the acting categories, there was only one nomination, one black nominee. So, like every year, this year also there was talk about how the Oscars are so
That
white
happens
and how there's
every
not
year.
enough inclusivity. I just feel like also in a year like that, when you're riding on that much controversy, I mean, Natalie Portman, for crying out loud, wore an outfit on which on her cape, she had all the names of all the female directors who could have been nominated but won.
I don't think that this year the Oscars were riding on any controversy.
No, but let me finish the thought. I'm saying on a year like that, when there's gender conversation happening, there's lack of, there's like racial sort of, there's an entire, racism row that's going on. I also feel like maybe that factors in eventually.
No, I wouldn't. I'll tell you why. Because all the points that you've raised are points that get discussed year after year after year. The only real controversy that you can speak of that happened at the Oscars was the Oscars So White campaign 5 years ago, where there were movies, I think, as good as Straight Outta Compton, which in spite of being as good as they were left out. And I remember that specific year, none of the acting categories had a single black actor in them. Even though that was a year where there were some really great performances, not like there were in this year. I'm saying that we've already gone through that one cycle of the Oscars being criticized for being white.
But this year also it got a fair share of criticism.
Sure, but I wouldn't
that.
call it a controversial Oscar though. I'm saying that was a controversial Oscar. This is an Oscar like any other Oscar, where every year when the nominees come out, there are always questions raised about diversity, and there are right questions asked. I'm not saying that they are not fitting. I'm just saying that's not what put me off the Oscars in terms of an excitement or interest point of view. It's really just the movies. Again, not even the quality of the movies. It's just generally I didn't feel as passionately about any of the films that were nominated for me to, want to wake up and root, apart from possibly Parasite, which I think the entire world was sort of rooting for. I think it's turned into the first movie ever to win an Oscar where not just Korean people, but folks across the world who want to see a really great international film get some sort of a recognition, and even Americans would have been rooting for Parasite. The other reason why I was not really looking forward to the Oscars is because I don't feel that no host policy is really working out. So overall, I mean, it's not about whether this year I felt excited because of the films or controversy. I'm saying over a period of time, there has been an accumulation of interest where you wake up early in the morning because you don't want to miss the Oscars, and you have such lovely memories of it from a few years ago, and every year there is disappointment. So I was disappointed last year as well, and I was disappointed the year before that.
Let's talk about the no host policy though. I mean, the Oscars were the first to do it. I mean, they've been doing it now consistently for 2 years, and actually here's what's interesting, right? Last year when they did it, when they had like multiple personalities come on and introduce other presenters or do little sketches and bits in between, their ratings actually spiked last year. But this year, for the first, I mean, it's the lowest, and the 92nd Academy Awards have gone down as also the lowest audience rating ever.
Which makes sense.
They've got like no one tuned in, and pretty much I also feel like why the fuck did we tune in at the end of it?
That's what I'm saying. So it's got to do with the movies as well, right?
Yeah.
It's got to do with what movie is nominated. Is there whenever there's a battle between like two really strong contenders, whether it's for the best picture, best actor, best actress, where there is that little bit of confusion, where an actor, for example, wins the Screen Actors Guild Award but loses the Golden Globes, or a director who wins the Directors Guild Award but loses the Golden Globe. I'm saying that usually there is sometimes there is quite often competition between people, and you're curious to see what happens. This year, like I said at the beginning, I feel like the winners were all a given. Apart from that, it's not really the no host policy that's the problem. What does the Oscar host do? He essentially has a really long monologue in the beginning of the show. Apart from that, he makes maybe 3 or 4 really small appearances, and then passes it on to presenters. And the way the Oscars do it is that even the presenters have bits.
Yeah.
So it's like some guys just come on and, sort of just announce the winners and leave. But a lot of times they get presenters who also happen to be either comedians or
actors who can pull off a little bit of a sketch or a little thing between them.
Which is great fun because
was fun this year as well. I mean, someone like a Maya.
No, I didn't think it was fun this year. I'm saying last year what they did right was that they had a lot of those little skits which didn't make you miss the host. This year, I didn't feel there were too many of them. So, like you were pointing out, you're right. The Maya Rudolph and Kristen Wiig was fine, but they also did it last year. I mean, it's nothing new. It's nothing, and also it's not consistent enough. It's not funny enough. It's not witty enough.
Yeah.
In fact, you were telling me earlier about how they just crammed the show up with musical numbers.
Correct.
Right?
I mean, there were so many musical performances at this year's Oscars. It felt like, I mean, you know, if you're ever going to complain about Bollywood awards, Bollywood awards, I called it. Bollywood awards, I mean, please go back to this year's Oscars then and like look at the number of musical performances they've crammed the show with. I mean, you started with Janelle Monáe's performance, which also, I mean, you have a lot of people applauding that performance and you have a lot of people scratching their heads and wondering what the hell was happening during that, you know, performance. Then you have Eminem come and perform, and like, I mean, please, no disrespect, we love Eminem. That was probably one of the highlights of the show for me, but it's like so random.
No, but the way they did it was lovely. In fact, I remember thinking about it. They did this nice little audio-visual footage of all the great soundtracks over the years. You know, the usual suspects, whether it was the Rocky music or there was the Jaws musical piece.
There's also Jai Ho in there, by the way.
There was Jai Ho. All the great songs, basically, not theme music like they did last year.
Yeah.
And then when they introduced Lose Yourself, they did this little bit of a prelude. And I was wondering why they are doing the prelude on the audio-visual.
Yeah,
and
they
then
stayed with Eminem for like 3-4, like
not
10,
just
15
that,
seconds
they did the build-up to the actual song and not the song. And then, of course, they cut to the fact that he was actually present on stage live. And I thought that was a wow moment if you think about it.
It was a wow moment because it was Eminem and he nailed that performance. But if you just look at it from like, you know, an Oscars perspective.
But why is he there?
Like, why are you there? It's
because
not
he
even...
did perform in 2002, I guess. So they were...
I don't know.
Fixed.
Like, I mean, most people are just like, yeah, acha, great, thank you. We got Eminem one highlight to a show mein, but like, what was the point of that performance?
Yeah, because you're right. It is very unlike the Oscars. They never have any performance that is not relevant.
Yeah, or that, I mean, unless you're celebrating an anniversary or let's say something.
That's why I said that's not relevant.
It was just so random. Then, of course, I'm just talking about in terms of musical performances. They opened the show.
It's like Vivek Oberoi performing at Filmfare Awards next year, right? Even though he's not had like a movie in years.
It's like, why are you here, Vivek?
Yeah,
Satya ko aake bahut saal
it's
ho
like
gaya. Company ko aake bahut
he does
saal
a
ho gaya.
medley of like Satya, Dum and Company.
No, he performs
and
to
wrote
Satya.
songs.
That's it.
That's like, what. That's like, I mean.
Yeah, it's pretty random.
Yeah.
So I'm saying you open with a musical performance. You have Eminem perform. Thank you, but like really random. Then you have right after Eminem, you have Utkarsh Ambudkar, this Indian actor. He comes and he raps and does a recap. You have Billie Eilish perform this year's In Memoriam again to song. You do a musical performance of every best song nominee
which they do every year.
Then you also do the entire orchestra of all the best themes, musical themes, and all the background score.
Yeah, man, that's like a lot of music.
I mean, yeah.
That did feel like Manik Chand Academy Awards.
After a point, you're like, bus karo yaar, nahi sunna.
No, but that's the point, right? I mean, for so many years, we've been talking about the difference between our awards and their awards. And the one thing that really separated the two, apart from the names of the awards itself, because they don't have like Fresh Face of the Year award type awards.
Best was Kriti Sanan's award, Nothing to Hide award.
Nothing
to Hide award.
There are several such names, funny names that they come up with every year. But I'm saying that apart from that, what really separates, I mean, the Oscars from any other award ceremony around the world is the wit and humor that they exhibit on stage.
And the class.
The fact that they have these superstars come on stage and, you know, perform funny bits, perform skits, but at the same time pay tribute to the movies. You know, that's extremely essential.
Yeah.
You can't ever lose track of the fact. So something like what Tom Hanks did this year, for example. But there was nothing about these Oscars which is supremely memorable, apart from obviously Bong Joon-ho's win, which we'll come to in a bit. But I'm saying from the performance point of view, there was nothing. There was no funny... Like, I mean, you might say that Maya Rudolph was funny, but Maya Rudolph is funny every year. She comes every year and she does a funny skit.
Same thing like when Steve Martin and Chris Rock came on stage.
Yeah,
I mean,
there was nothing
they did a
extraordinary
great
about it.
10-minute roast, but I'm like, okay, we knew you were going to tap all these
No,
subjects.
I mean, what did they talk about? They spoke about the fact that there are Oscars so white again, the fact that there are no black actors. They spoke about the fact that there were no vaginas in the best directors list. Again, the lack of female directors. I'm saying I get it. These are important points. They need to be touched
They also
upon.
roasted Jeff
But
Bezos quite a bit.
you are talking about these issues in the pre-award red carpet thing, then you're speaking about it in sort of Janelle Monáe's performance made reference to them. Then you're speaking about it, in the opening skit, which is also fine. But what else are you doing? Like, for example, he made a reference about how Brad Pitt was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and then he made a joke about how it's like looking in the mirror. But in earlier Oscars would really be about encapsulating that 1 year at the movies. That's what the opening skit would be about. They would, of course, make references to all these other problematic aspects of the Oscars, political things, all of that, the state of the country and stuff like that. But more importantly, it acted like a recap for the year gone by. So you would, for example, pick up an actor who gave a great performance, then you would pick another actor who gave a great performance, and then you would pick up a director. For example, they made a Martin Scorsese reference this year, but that's it. There was that one throwaway Brad Pitt reference, Martin Scorsese, and then because there was no African American actor nominated, I mean, there was just one. Chris Rock had to go to Mahershala Ali, who wasn't even nominated this year. Why was he spoken of at all? It's because of the lack of meat and material
representation
that
also,
you have to keep making references to earlier years' achievements and, memorable moments.
So one of the other things, of course, that we look forward to at the Oscars every year are the speeches, right? Because, I mean, I feel like every actor or every technician or director who goes up on that stage and wins tries to, use those 45 seconds that they get to sort of, make an impact, to say something of value and worth, which they know will be repeated for years to come. I mean, like when Leonardo DiCaprio won his Oscar, we'll never forget what he talked about, right? He said that, we can't take this earth for granted because I didn't take this Oscar for granted. Those words we're always going to remember. In terms of this year's speeches, I feel like my favorite speech of this year, and not because it was a great speech, but just because it was such a weird speech, is Joaquin Phoenix's. I mean, did you remember that whole
Joaquin Phoenix he delivers speeches like that wherever he goes.
Yeah, but
he also delivered a very similar speech in Golden Globes.
Actually, I think
he's basically on this whole guilt trip. And he's himself on a guilt trip, and he wants to take the whole world on the guilt trip.
But
along
I'm saying,
with him.
even if it's on a guilt trip, I mean, the speeches actually that he made at previous award shows, whether it was the Globes or the SAG Awards, were far more impactful than the one he made on the Oscar stage.
Yeah, of course, he kept the best one. He knew he is winning. It was like it was a given. There were very few chances.
No, I'm saying those were way better. He talked about inclusivity and women.
So then he ran out of things.
Yeah, he talked about how he has not paid attention to his craft and how about second chances on other stages. But on this stage, what was the thing that you took away from his award?
Basically, beginning of the year, Joaquin Phoenix made a list of 5 things he wants to speak about, and then he just started ticking the list off at every award ceremony. So you're right, he spoke about inclusivity at one, he spoke about lack of female
women and African Americans on his sets,
and then he this year on this episode this award ceremony
episode of the awards
the latest episode of the awards, he spoke about
artificial insemination of cows.
Again, he was talking about, in a sense, the environment itself,
but
and the world we are leaving behind for our kids. So it's not very different from what DiCaprio was saying in terms of
I get it. I'm just
talking
saying,
points.
It was funny because in India it's telecast at the time when all of us are having our morning breakfast and our first cup of coffee with a little bit of milk in it, right? And it's just suddenly like, oh, I'm feeling so guilty about the milk that I'm drinking right now because Joaquin Phoenix just spoke about. I swear, I'm not joking. I went for a meeting after, right? I didn't order milk with my coffee. I was like, I need to have this black.
My whole deal is, how does a guy who wins Best Actor take the conversation to cow's milk? How does he do that? Like, how do you go from winning a Best Act? I get that you want to talk about the environment and stuff like that. Cow's milk, so damn random. And then after that came Renée Zellweger for her Best Actress. And I don't know what the hell she said in her speech.
We're best when we're looking to our heroes.
I also think she followed Joaquin Phoenix, so she must have been under a lot of pressure to...
She just didn't know how to wrap up. I mean, for everyone else, they give them 45 seconds. Poor technicians. I mean, how many years have we watched technicians go up there and in 45 seconds they start playing the damn music? She must have gone on for at least 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. There's nothing...
It's a problem.
No.
Your first award
the
of the night
time
is Brad
not
Pitt.
the issue. The material that is delivered in the time is the problem. In the past, we've had Best Actor and Actress winners go up there, whether it's a Halle Berry, who I still remember her speech from like 10 years ago, or whether it's an Anne Hathaway or any of these guys.
Olivia Colman last year.
Or Olivia Colman last year, when they go up there and they deliver great. See, again, last year too, I was really involved. I woke up in the morning purely because I was... See, it's like that, right? You don't want spoilers. It's like a Game of Thrones episode. You don't want to wake up at 9 a.m. in India to find out that X and X people have won supporting actor and actress when you were really keen to know who actually won it. But it's not a surprise if you wake up at 9 a.m. and everyone who was supposed to win has won.
Yeah.
And you've not really missed out on any great humor or any great performance or any of that.
I mean, imagine if we had slept through their entire Moonlight and La La Land controversy where they read out the wrong name.
That would have been
we would have been like, oh, did we sleep through that?
Yeah, correct. So anyway, coming back full circle to the whole conversation, since we started with you asking me if how I feel about it. This is the first year, and the thing is that the day after the Oscars, I always say this, and then by next year I change my mind. This is the first year where I very strongly feel that next year I'm not going to be setting an alarm clock to watch.
Achal Goa, please. Yeah, we'll end up watching all the movies like we do right before we finish. Like Aniruddha and I are always waiting till the last day to finish all the movies.
No, that's not true. This is the first year it's happened with me. Also because the Oscars were preponed by a month.
I'm just saying that
when the Oscar nominations get announced around Jan 14th or 15th, and the Oscars take place end of Feb, early March, I always get enough time.
Fine. I take it back. You're very organized about the Oscar screenings.
But this year was a rush. Yeah, this year we hadn't watched pretty much like a lot of it.
Yeah, I'm so glad we went in to watch Parasite. We actually watched Parasite the night before the Oscars.
I'm also glad I waited. I'm saying that I'm glad that I did not rush to like a lot of people I know who downloaded Parasite and watched it because there's a really good HD print available. And
Please go watch it in theaters, guys. We're not promoting piracy over here. It's a great film. Theater mein jaake paisa do, please.
Yeah, I mean, I could have easily, watched it early. I'm saying I'm glad that I waited till the last day to watch it because, I mean, that is such a big screen film. And you're right. For anybody who's listening to this show, hopefully in the month of February, it's still playing in theaters, and I think they've given it an extended run after it won the Best Picture.
In fact, all of your Oscar favorites are kind of coming back to theaters in the next few weeks because now that they've either won or they've been received.
Yeah, but you don't really need to go back and watch The Joker. It really wasn't a movie.
But 1917 तो तुमको theater में ही देखना पड़ेगा. तुम 1917 घर पे देखोगे तो बहुत.
1917 won't get an extended release. It didn't win anything, and it was already playing in theaters right now.
Yeah, but if there is a show out there, I don't know.
So right now it seems like I may not wake up next year, but then again, when it's close to Oscar time and the buzz builds up, then you feel like...
FOMO gets the better of us, yeah. Okay, let's talk about our scene stealers at the Oscars. For me, I mean, just because of that artificial insemination conversation so early in the morning and the fact that I'm still thinking about whether I should add milk to my coffee or not, I think it's Joaquin Phoenix because whether you love it, hate it, that conversation, that speech stays with you. And, we sort of recapped a lot of the moments and decided, like, for me at least, that was the moment that I was like, okay, this is a scene stealer moment.
Yeah, no, for me, it's definitely Bong Joon-ho. I mean, the only reason after having sat through 3 hours of a boring, drab Oscar show, the only real joy you got out of that show is watching Parasite win. And not just watching Parasite win, but Bong Joon-ho just going up on stage. And every time he brought something interesting to what he was saying, So first he went up to get the Best Writing Award, which was the first indication of the fact that it might have now some sort of a chance at Best Film.
Yeah.
It's not the first time that a foreign language film seemed like it might win. But what happens is that if you just end up winning the foreign language film, your chances of getting the Best Picture always go down. So there are a couple of indications that give you an idea of which film might win Best Picture, and 2 of those are the writing and the editing awards. So if you win either one of the 2, you're in the running. And the reason I felt like Parasite became a favorite midway through the telecast was because after Bong Joon-ho won Best Screenplay, Ford vs. Ferrari got Best Editing instead of 1917, which was the closest competitor to Parasite. So it became really evident at that point of time that there was no way that 1917, without having won either script or editing, could go on to win Best Film. Also, Bong Joon-ho was always the favorite to win Best Director, irrespective of whether the film got Best Picture or not. Same thing happened with Alfonso Cuarón last year, who was the favorite to win Best Director for Roma, even though Roma, being a foreign language film, didn't seem like a safe bet for Best Film. But this year, it's like he won Best Writing, and there was that first burst of joy because it's like, wow, I have won Best Writing in spite of it being a foreign language film. Then, of course, it was him getting foreign language film. And I was really surprised when he said in his acceptance speech that I'm now ready to go out there and drink. Because, I mean, any fool would have said that even if he wasn't winning Best Picture, he was definitely going to be going for the Best Director, trophy, which he then won. And for me, then gave the best speech of the night, where he basically quoted Martin Scorsese. So he quoted Martin Scorsese for an award where he was up against Martin Scorsese. I think it's almost like Irishman got made and Martin Scorsese got nominated just so Bong Joon-ho could, live out this childhood fantasy that he had, where he doesn't just win an Oscar, he wins it in competition to Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino, 2 people who, one he's admired and the other one who's been a real friend of his in the Western film industry. And that was great, right? I love that moment where he basically gave this great quote and he said that this was said by Martin Scorsese. And the entire audience stood up giving Scorsese an ovation even though he hadn't won and was just sitting in the audience. Then he gave out a shout out to Tarantino, talking about how Tarantino really campaigned for his films at a time when Americans didn't even know about Bong Joon-ho's films. So I really feel like for me, not just the scene stealer, but the wow moment of the show was also really Parasite winning and Bong Joon-ho winning.
Okay. And in terms of our Binge-o-meter, where would we put the Oscars? I mean, this year's Oscars.
I would not binge it at all. Instead, you would rather just, it's almost like you skip the meal and you go for a fast food option. Just go onto YouTube and just watch some of the high points of the show.
Actually, if you just go to the Academy Awards Twitter timeline, they've put up all the best speeches and they've put up some of the skits. They've put up bits of Steve Martin and Chris Rock's, opening act as well. So I actually agree with you as well. I mean, don't watch the whole show. It's 3.5 hours long and it's so boring. I mean, trust us, just skip it. Go watch the best speeches. Go watch some of the best acts. Go watch some of the musical acts, not all of them. Way better than watching and sitting through 3.5 hours of boringness.
Whatever you do,
Is
don't miss out.
A word? No.
Don't miss out on Olivia Colman's little skit before she presented an award.
Not really a skit. She's just funny.
She was just being Olivia Colman.
Yeah.
Just
I feel like even if we hung out with Olivia Colman,
she'd be as funny as that. Yeah, I completely agree.
All right, guys, if you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or on ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media handles. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to reach out to Guha and me, well, I'm at Janisek85 on Instagram and Twitter, and Aniruddha is at Aniguha on Instagram and Twitter. All right, guys, we'll see you next week with a brand new episode. Say bye-bye, Ani.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that show. We'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week. Thank you, HDFC Life, for coming on board. Also, would like to thank Storytel for continuing the long time advertising that they've been doing with us. And if you have a brand and you'd like to advertise with us, please send us an email. We'd love to talk to you. And let me tell you a couple of things that you should check out this week. On States of Anarchy, Humsani talks about the Brazil-India relationship. On Agla Station Adulthood, Ayushi and Ritasha talk about pleasure, sex, and much more. On a nostalgia-laden episode of the Geek Fruit podcast, Tejas and Dinkar go back to the franchise with the Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies and talk about how they hold up today, 12 years after the last movie came out. On our Kannada podcast, Thalle Harate, scholar Avinash Amble combines neuroscience, mathematical logic, and the cutting edge of computer science to explain the history of machine vision to Pawan and Surya. On Tapri Tales, Madhuri weaves a tale around a conversation between three friends. Thanks and keep listening.
Hi, I'm Satyajit.
Hi, I'm Racheta.
We are from the Open Library Project and we host a podcast called Paperback.
Paperback is a podcast where we engage with stalwarts and experts from various industries, suggesting non-fiction titles that contributed to their journey in a big way.
We've had guests like Anjali Raina, Dr. Marcus Rani, Dr. Swati Lodha, Ambi Parmeswaran, Apurva Damani, and many more on our show Paperback. Find new episodes every Wednesday on IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.